Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Security DNA podcast. Join Security Business Editor-in-Chief Paul Rothman and Bridgepoint Advisors partner Kelly Bond live at ESX for an inside look at the M&A boom that's reshaping the industry.
Okay, I'm here at ESX 2025 with Kelly Bond of Bridgepoint Advisors now.
Hey, how are you doing?
We're doing great. So I
good.
wanted to talk with you about the M&A landscape here in the industry, but first, let's talk about the changes for you.
Okay.
What's happened in the past 6 months?
Okay. Well, we've had an amazing opportunity just to kind of rebrand and refresh. So my partner, Steve Rubin, and I have worked together for the last several years, just kind of took a look at the industry as a whole and said, we're seeing some different faces and talking to some new folks and thought, let's take this opportunity to create a new name and still offering the same mergers and acquisitions services that we did, but we also added a new partner, Jason Greeley, and so we thought this is a great opportunity just to have a bit of a refresh. So Davis Mergers didn't go away. Ron Davis is still contributing in articles, and that's the part that he really loves, but we kind of took the M&A piece of it, and that part falls under the Bridgepoint Advisors name. So it was all done in a very friendly and strategic way. And we love Ron and want him to keep doing what he's doing, but this gives us just an opportunity, if I want to do this for another 10 years, to kind of get to do it under our brand.
So the new person, was it Jason?
Jason Greeley. So Jason and I worked together for probably close to 15 years in the industry. We did acquisitions for Alarm Capital Alliance, which then became My Alarm Center. And then we actually worked for a lender prior to that. And so we have a lot of history together, and we both did deals with Steve Rubin. So we've all had many, many years of experience together. And I'm super excited to have him working with us. He's a good friend, and we all work very well together.
So you bring a pretty unique perspective to the mergers and acquisitions, the business broker space, for lack of a better term, I guess. So you've been on the integrator side, you've been on the lender side, as you said. How does that give you greater insight into the process, and help, Joe Alarm Dealer, put his company up for sale?
Yeah. So, I'm pushing 30 years in the industry.
You don't look it.
Well, thanks for saying that. It's always fair to say on a podcast, but I think it is the time that I've spent doing deals, and all three of us, frankly, we see what it looks like from a seller's perspective, from a buyer's perspective. It's not easy, and typically sellers do it one time.
Right.
So they're getting all this education, but they're not going to ever have to do it again in most cases.
Right.
So, but you go through the process, and what we have really learned through it is that sellers especially, they need hand-holding through this. They need to understand what's going on and need to have somebody on their team, and that's what we do. We take measures to protect their interest and to make sure that they're getting the best deal that they can, and I will tell you, we earn every penny. I mean, we are in it from start to finish, and we make friends along the way, people that, you stay in touch with, and, because you are working so closely together through the process that it really, you spend a ton of time together, and it's always a little sad when a deal closes, because, I'm so used to talking to people.
Well, you make friends for life, right?
You do. So, and funny enough, this industry, people don't want to leave. And it's probably the same in any industry, because you just make friends, you get to know people.
Right.
But even seeing some of the awards that were given out at SEAC, Stan Martin, who, that's just, it's so
pillar.
Heartwarming. Yeah. And he is. He's been in our industry forever, but he's made he's left such a wonderful impression on our space. He's done so much for our space. And, you see folks like that, and he's trying to retire supposedly, but he still keeps popping up.
He'll be back.
But it's folks like that. I think we have an industry that is just, it does so much for the business owners
Right.
that I think they just feel this affiliation, this affinity to want to be around the folks that are still in it.
Well, you pointed out, and it's interesting that, yes, this, especially at ESX, the ownership group, it skews older, right? It skews toward this spot in maybe where our industry is, where there are a lot of generational owners trying to get out of the space. So, it's time to retire, to walk off into the sunset and that sort of thing. So I guess there's a lot of room for business brokers, in the industry. But where do you see it as far as, is there an excess inventory? Is it kind of been steady? How do you feel it's been right now?
So it's interesting. You're exactly right. First of all, we are an industry that's made up of a bunch of baby boomer owners.
Right.
And used to, there would be succession plans with kids of owners.
Right.
And that's not the same.
Not a lot of
much
Eric Garners out there, right?
No. But he's a perfect example.
Right.
He's doing something completely different than he was doing in the family business.
Right.
So, and great for him. Love Eric. But, the owners are working longer, and they are having to come up with their own succession plan, and it's not to their kids. They have to figure out, do I sell? Do I have people in the business that want to take it over?
Mm-hmm.
And, that doesn't even happen very frequently. So the good thing is that there are a lot more buyers than there are sellers.
Still,
and
okay.
Oh my gosh, we add buyers to our database weekly,
Really?
sometimes daily.
So there are a lot of deals that we don't hear about then, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, especially if it's a regional buyer.
Okay.
Things kind of fly under the radar. But there are also some sales that either the buyer or sellers say, we don't want this to be public. We want this to stay private. We're protecting our customer base, so on and so forth. But the good thing is that the sellers that come to us for the most part are much more sophisticated than they were 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
They're doing their homework.
Good.
They're cleaning up their business.
So they're reading my stuff, I hope.
Yeah, yours and mine.
Right.
So when they come to us, in most cases, they are much more ready to go.
Okay.
And every once in a while, we've got a seller that really just wants to take chips off the table, but they want to keep working for a little while.
Okay.
But most of the time, they're looking for their retirement, or they want to have an opportunity to go do the next thing. And so the good thing is that there's typically a buyer that can fit the needs of every seller that's out there.
Because I would think it's kind of difficult. There's some people who have difficulty letting go, and now that they've made the decision, they want their their employees, their family to go into the right hands, right?
Absolutely right.
So do you have to vet the buyers for these sellers?
Absolutely, we do.
Okay.
And what we come up with kind of a package in our mind, so to speak, of what does the buyer look like for each seller.
Okay.
And then when we take a deal to market, we are able to say right up front, hey, listen, this is what they're looking for.
Okay.
And if this doesn't look like a deal that you're going to do, let's not waste each other's time.
Okay.
And in some cases, I'll give you a great example where it's a company that the seller really wants to retire. He may be willing to do like a 90-day transition.
Okay.
But the buyer is looking for somebody that, they're looking for a transaction where the seller is willing to stay on for a couple of years.
Okay.
And usually that is like a private equity kind of deal. And that just doesn't always work.
Okay.
Some people, when they're ready, they're ready. It could be for health issues, or they're just tired.
Right.
They've done the business for a long time, and they just want to be done.
Right? Yeah.
So, anyway, but there are buyers for every deal.
Okay.
Most definitely.
So PE are the ones who make all the headlines these days, right?
Yep.
So there's a lot of private equity coming into the industry, but are there other buyers out there? So what was a typical other buyer? Is it just an ADT or like some kind of big company just trying to fold more integrators because they need people kind of thing?
Well, so even big companies like that, like ADT, they have investors, and those investors have said, hey, we want these growth numbers.
Right.
And so they are a very different buyer than someone that is the guy down the street from you. who has a similar business, and they're willing to pay just to get you out of the marketplace. You know,
Okay.
you've been competing for 30 years,
Right.
and sometimes they're strategic regional deals. Again, one that you never hear about because it just happens in the dark of night almost.
Right.
But those transactions are awesome. They
Okay.
are usually great for both the buyer and the seller. Oftentimes, you know, things get kind of negotiated on their own.
Right.
We will usually be brought in to represent a seller, and in doing so, you know, we're looking to help them meet their needs. But usually when it's a regional transaction, you know, they're either going to a bank that they may have the cash to do
Right.
the deal themselves. There could be some seller financing involved in the transaction, but for the most part, these are transactions that are done on a smaller scale than what private equity is looking for. You know,
Okay.
they have a certain size that they want, and
Right.
they all want the same size.
I
And
got you.
you know, and what we explain is, look, we appreciate the size that you want, that there's not a lot of deals like that in our
Right.
space.
Right.
And for you to get those deals, you got to be willing to pay up, because there's so many just like you that are willing to.
There's a lot of competition out there, right?
There is, especially for a certain size transaction,
Right.
and especially if it's commercial fire.
Mm-hmm.
Although I do want to say this, the residential deals that come across, you know, our desk, and, you know, it's a seller that has however much RMR they have, certainly if they're in certain pockets of geography across the country, those deals go so fast,
Really?
and they are the easiest ones. So for those residential dealers, don't feel like you don't have a home.
Okay.
They are the quickest deals for us to
Wow.
get closed.
That's counter to what I've heard.
Trust me, I'm telling you because we see it.
Okay.
And the multiples are still
Well, this is
super
where
strong.
I was about to go there.
You would not believe how strong
Really?
they are.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, we're shocked at how strong they are in some cases.
in resi.
In
That's
resi,
crazy.
and
Yeah.
especially if there's a resi commercial mix.
Yeah.
But we still do resi deals, and we're happy to do them. And I don't want the resi dealers to feel like they're not going to have the ability to sell, because they do.
Are we at the peak of valuation, like across the board? We're going to hear from Mike Barnes tomorrow, and
Yeah,
I'm sure he's
yeah.
going to tell us all about this. But
Yeah.
are we at the peak of valuations? Have we passed the peak? Are we kind of somewhere in the middle there?
You know, that's a great question, and I don't know that I fully know the answer, because I think you have certain buyers that have come into the marketplace and they're paying these exorbitant multiples that have laid the groundwork for what is happening in our space. And because of that, it's causing buyers to have to pay up on deals. And not all buyers can or will.
Okay.
But when you fit into that box of, okay, here's the thing that those buyers that will pay up are looking for,
Right.
you can do very, very, very well.
Oh, good.
I don't know when those numbers will right themselves,
Right.
because I feel like there have been some leaders that are, you know, they're paying up, and you sure are lucky if you can get in on that
Right.
sale, you know.
Right.
I mean, it's money that sellers would never have dreamed of. So, but you know, our industry is so cyclical.
Okay. Yeah. So
I think
it's-
we're going to come back, you know. I hope it's not for a while.
Right.
I mean, it makes it a very exciting time.
Right, for
so.
sure. So it is, well, it kind of leads to my next question is the industry contracting? Are there fewer just sellers and buyers out there than there used to be?
Certainly not few buyers.
Okay.
Not fewer buyers. No, I mean, our list grows daily. I mean,
Okay.
literally, it's just incredible. I know I said weekly before, but I can't even tell you, almost every day I will get an email from somebody that says, we're looking to invest money in the industry and blah, blah, blah. So sellers, you know, we started off the year with a couple of really nice closings right out of the gate. And then we've gone a couple of months that have been a little more quiet than
Okay.
normal, but now all of a sudden in the last 2
Picked
weeks,
back up?
our pipeline is picking back up.
It's kind of like an end of the year thing, right? As well.
Well, and I also think with tariffs,
Okay.
with just the administration changing, and I think people have to take some time to say, what does this look like?
Right.
Should I hang on to my business? And we're doing really well. I don't know what's going to happen. But I think we're seeing a lot of positives in our economy, and so I think I don't think it's going to end, because I think we're always going to have people that say, is the timing right for me?
Right.
Until some life-changing thing occurs, and then they say, okay, I have to do something.
Yeah.
But if you're have to do something right now, you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Awesome.
It's always interesting to see what every year looks like,
Right.
and we've always been busy, and I'm so thankful for that. We're so blessed that that's been the case, and it's not to say that it is not a stressful job. And I will tell you, anyone that says, oh well, after I do this I'm going to go be a broker, and I will say, come on, let's see if you got it, because it's not as easy as it might look.
Well, like deals are falling off trees. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's not quite like that, but we have been so fortunate, and I hope that we have kind of created a reputation for ourselves that has outlasted the Davis Mergers name, and we'll continue with the Bridgepoint Advisors name.
Awesome.
And then, people will think of us when they are looking to do something.
So just to conclude, if you had one piece of advice you could give a prospective seller, to get ready to call Kelly, or call any of the business brokers in our industry, what would the one thing that they need to have, or one thing they need to do before they give you a call?
I would say, look at the articles, go to the seminars, look at the videos that are about preparing your business for a sale.
Okay.
All of that is so invaluable, and ultimately it is going to increase the value of your business if, when you are ready to go to market, you've done a good job. And the advice is, run your business as if you are going to sell it today.
Okay.
Run it that way from the very beginning, so then you're always ready, and it will ultimately create more value for the business.
Awesome. Well, tell people how they can find you.
They can find me at Bridgepoint-Advisors.com, or you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. It's Kelly Bond. It's pretty easy. I'm very active on there. Certainly they can send me an in-message on LinkedIn, and we will connect. And I'm usually at all the shows, and
Right.
We've got webinar series coming up, so
Okay.
you'll be able to find that. We'll promote all of that on LinkedIn. We do send out a weekly newsletter that has a tip of the week, and it also shows most of our current listings. So you can sign up for that on our website, but certainly plenty of ways to be found.
Absolutely.
So,
And if you're listening to this on YouTube, it'll be in the description box as well. There'll be a link as well. So thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for this special episode of Security DNA. To access our podcast lineup, go to podbean.com and search for Security DNA. You can also find our podcasts on our Security Frontline, Integrator Newswire, and Security Week e-newsletters, as well as on our YouTube channel. From Paul, Kelly, and everyone at Security InfoWatch, thank you for tuning in.